Hello, my favorite English language learners. It is your favorite English teacher here, Amy Joy, and today I'm going to give you a little presentation on how to cite in MLA format. So first of all, there are two types of citations when you are writing a paper. There are what we call in-text citations, and from this name, you can hear that this citation is in your text. It appears in your writing after a quote, a paraphrase, or a summary. So this is actually a part of your paper. And here's a sample right here. According to the author, some students want to get A's with only minimal effort. And then the author's name is in the parentheses and his name is Holtgreave. Now, there is another type of citation that we use, and that is in the work's cited page. That is listed at the end, and it includes a lot more information like the name of the author, the title of the article or the chapter or the book, etc. So just know that there are two different types of citations, and when you are talking with your professor, if you have a question about this, you might want to specify which type of citation you are talking about. Sometimes my students ask me, oh, do I need the title in my citation? And then I ask, well, which citation are you referring to? The one in your paper or the one at the end in the list? So there are two different types of citations that we might be talking about. And here is an example of the works cited page. That is the list at the end that has all that information together in one place. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So like I said, we've got our in-text citations, and I gave you that example already with number 1. According to the author, some students want to get A's with only minimal effort, and you can see the author's last name in parentheses at the end of the paraphrase. And also notice that we put the period outside of the parentheses. Now, there is another way to do an in-text citation, and that is by putting the author's name in the sentence itself. So instead of saying, according to the author, we can say, according to Holtgreave, some students want to get A's with only minimal effort. So notice, the only thing that you absolutely have to include in your in-text citations are the author's last name. In some other citation styles like APA or some other ones, you might put the date, or I've seen some people put like the title or the author's first and last name. And in MLA, for in-text citations, you only need to include the author's last name. Now, if you are citing a book, you do also need to include the page number, but for a lot of my classes and my sources, we use online and electronic sources, which don't have page numbers. So if you are citing a website and you don't know how to cite it, you do not need the page number. You also do not need the paragraph number. I have seen students try to cite paragraphs, and you actually don't need that, at least in MLA formatting. So if you're citing a book and you need the page number, you can just put that in the parentheses, either after the author's name, if you've put the author's name at the end of the sentence, or you can put the page number in parentheses by itself if you included the author's last name in the sentence. So notice you can include the title of the article that you're citing, but it is not mandatory. So here's an example if you want to include the title. In the article, Too Smart to Fail, Joseph Holtgreave says that some students want to get A's with only minimal effort. So sometimes this is a nice way to introduce the source you're citing, but it is not mandatory. And one thing I want to say is that a lot of times students will oversight, they will give me too much information about the source that ends up making it wordy and repetitive. So my advice to you, be intentional about whether you include the title of the article or not. So if you are writing a paper with many sources, you have like 5 to 10 sources in your paper, do not include the title every single time you cite something. You might just be taking a statistic from an article and citing the statistic. In that case, you don't need the whole long title of the article. Just cite your fact and put the last name in parentheses at the end, and that's it. Don't use so much word, or don't use so many words and distract your reader from the point you're actually trying to make. When you include the title, there's too many words, it gets very repetitive. And here's kind of an example. In the article, Too Smart to Fail, Joseph Holtgreave says that students are too obsessed with grades. And then in Jessica Leahy's article, Introverted Kids Need to Speak Up at School, she argues that students are not speaking up enough. Including the title includes a lot more words. And when you do this over and over and over again, your instructor is either thinking one of two things. They only know one way to cite by using this kind of title author template, or they are trying to put more words in their paper to reach the word count. So like I said, be intentional if you're going to include the title of the article. Maybe it's really important that you include it, and that's okay. But if you have like a synthesis paper that has just a lot of sources, do not include the title every single time. Now, sometime that you might want to include the title is if you are writing a paper mainly about one source. So if you're writing a summary and response paper, maybe just a personal response to a single source, you definitely want to include the title and maybe give a little summary of it, so that your reader knows the context and what that article is about. And in that case, the title would be important. But again, if you've got a paper with like 10 sources, do not include 10 title names in your paper. You can save that for the Works Cited page later. Now, besides in-text citations, we also have to do a Works Cited page. And that's when we have the whole list of all of the sources that we used. Now, most often in my class, we are citing websites. So I've just given you here the information that you should include when citing a website. And that is the author's name, the title of the article, the publisher or like the website name, the date published, and then the URL. If you do not have the date that it was published, you can also put at the end the date it was accessed. But if you have most of this information, your instructors will be happy with you. So here we can see the last name and then the first name, the title of the article, the major website publisher, the date it was published, and then the URL. Now, I want to show you a little bit how to format a Works Cited page. So we are going to move over to Google Docs, and I will see you there. Okay, so here is a rough draft of a Works Cited page. It already has a lot of good information, but there are still some things we need to fix. And the first thing is the title. We want to make sure we always say Works Cited. Then we need to check that our authors are listed in alphabetical order, or that their names go from A to Z. So here we have S, S comes before Z, and then we have a J. So J actually needs to come before both of these. So that looks pretty good. But let's take a look at this first citation. So we have Jessica Leahy, and actually Jessica is a first name, not a last name. So we want to make sure that we list all of the authors by their last name. And just one way that you can tell if you're unsure, If a name is listed with a comma, for example, Leahy, comma, Jessica, then that means that the name, this is the last name. But if you just have a name with no commas, like Jessica Leahy with no commas, then Jessica is the first name. So here we've got all of our authors listed in alphabetical order. And next we want to make sure that everything is double spaced. So make sure that you double space. And then the last thing we need to do is indent or move our lines in. So the first line of each citation will stay with the margin, but you just want to hit tab every time there is an additional line. When you indent the second line, this line also goes in, so you just need to hit delete, and then this is what your citation should look like. So moving on to this one, we'll hit tab, and then this one, tab, this one, tab, and beautiful. So this is a completed Works Cited page. Now, a Works Cited page requires you to include a lot of information about each source. You know, the title, the author, the publisher, the date access, the URL, you know, all these things, and it can be really hard to remember. And let me tell you, your instructors do not expect you to memorize how to write a Works Cited page. You should never be required in like a timed writing to have a Works Cited page unless you are given the citations or for some reason you're being tested on how to cite. But that being said, I want to encourage you for the times you do have to have a Works Cited to use some resources that are available to you to help you cite. So here are some links. You can go to this website and they have all of the MLA requirements for how to make a Works Cited page, what information to include, what order to include it in. There's even this website called EasyBib. You can literally just type in the URL and they will generate a citation for you. And then you also can refer to my sample Works Cited page that I've just posted. So that should be helpful to you as well. Think of these resources kind of like a calculator or an equation cheat sheet. A lot of times math professors don't expect you to memorize really long equations. Neither do your instructors in university expect you to memorize everything about citing. And these are some great resources that you can use to help you. So let's just quickly review what we've covered today. Remember that there are two types of citations when writing. You've got your in-text citations, and that is your citations that go in your writing and in your paper. You only need to include the last name, either in the sentence or in parentheses at the end. Remember that the title is optional, and include a title of your article if you're only talking about maybe one or two sources. And an example of that might be a summary and response paper. If you're using many sources, avoid including titles every time you cite because it gets wordy and your teachers think that you're just trying to meet the word count requirement. Then in addition to your in-text citations, we also have another type of citation, and that is what goes in your Works Cited page, which is the long list of sources at the end. These include all of the information about the source that you can find, like the author name, the title, the publisher, the date, or the URL. And don't forget, please use the resources available to you that can help you cite. That is more than acceptable, and that will help you create more proper citations when writing your Works Cited. So that is all for today. Happy writing and happy citing, and I will see you next time. Bye.